Nigeria is yet to maximize the revenue generation opportunities from the export of agricultural produce due to the non-certification of commodities. Kola Masha, CEO of Babban, Gona, joins me now for more on this and the task ahead for the incoming administration. Kola, thank you so much. Pleasure to have you on the show today.
My pleasure.
Now, the non-certification of Nigeria's agro-produce for exports is said to be costing the country up to $1 billion annually. Obviously, for those countries, continents like North America, the EU, safety is, is number one on the list. But we continue to fail those tests. So I think a good place to start would be perhaps if you could help us just identify the specific reasons why Nigeria's agri-produce continue to get rejected.
Well, I think it stems from a couple different factors. I will focus on the production side factors as well as the post-production or post-harvest factors. So on the production side, I think if you look at, one of the biggest concerns that folks have from a safety perspective with fresh fruits and vegetables tends to be in pesticide and general agrochemical residue. Now, I think one of the fundamental challenges that we face in Nigeria is that if you look at the list of chemicals that are available for sale in Nigeria legally, oftentimes those chemicals actually do not follow the same standards of the EU or the US. So basically, we have chemicals that are available for sale that are actually banned in other parts of the world. So you're basically starting off with a major challenge. Now, secondly, you actually have a scenario where technically there's a relatively limited enforcement of what chemicals are available in the markets. From a regulatory standpoint, I think so you also have the challenge that even chemicals that are banned are still available for purchase. And oftentimes farmers might utilize those chemicals because they may either have greater effectiveness or lower costs than those that are legal. And what that ends up creating is a perverse incentive for farmers to utilize those products.
Okay, so
I think there's just.
Okay, so I'll take it from there. So, I want to believe that the authorities or the regulatory bodies, maybe perhaps the Ministry of Agriculture, are very well, aware of this. So, what are the steps being taken, or how difficult is it to identify that this particular pesticides or chemicals are banned in the EU, US, and of course there's a high likelihood that our products are going to be banned. Therefore, it would only make sense that we go back to the drawing table, look at those chemicals, see what chemicals are allowed, and then conform and just get with the program as it were. So my question is, and I continue to remain puzzled by this because it has persisted for years. What exactly is the problem? Whose table does this stop at? Why are we still where we are?
Well, I think the unfortunate reality is that it's somewhat of a complex problem. So I hope you can hear me okay.
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Oh, perfect. Sorry, I thought we froze for a second. So I was saying that it's unfortunately somewhat of a complex challenge in the sense that there are actually multiple different agencies and that are responsible for this. I think if you now start looking at the post-harvest activity, a lot of the agencies that are responsible for this tend to be a lot of the agencies that are at the ports, which tend to fall under a different jurisdiction. So I think to a certain degree, I think to solve this value chain challenge, you probably would need to as in many countries, when they want to harness these types of opportunities, they appoint somebody who has the ability to basically operate across these different institutions and agencies to ensure alignment of different groups. But I wanted to also just touch on, the availability of the chemicals is really only one piece. The second piece, which is now the post-harvest side, the reality is that many times a lot of these products, from the point they are produced to the point they actually are picked up in a supermarket in London, could be as long as 4 to 6 weeks. And so the post-harvest treatment, cleaning, maybe treating with some other chemicals to ensure that they are able to last that long and still be in good shape for a user to pick up, is also another critical piece. And I think the final piece is the quality of our inspections at the ports. Right, the reality, you don't want rejections to be happening at the ports in London or the ports in other parts of the world. The reality is you have a rigorous process to reject products at your home port. And I think oftentimes that process is not as effective as it should be.
Right. So, okay, there is an incoming administration from May. Perhaps let's take a few steps forward. What immediate steps need to be taken? You've talked about the agencies and, of course, chain of command and how the different levels and steps that have to be taken before, that involves the entire process. But what needs to change? Because obviously nothing has changed in the last 8 years. So what needs to change, in your opinion, immediate steps that need to be taken as a matter of urgency to begin to change this? And it's just not a Nigeria problem. According to Afreximbank, 76% of agro-produce from Africa are actually rejected. So let's also mention that this is an Africa problem, but we're specifically talking about Nigeria. So in your opinion, what immediate steps need to be taken?
So I think first and foremost, we have to identify, probably 2 or 3 maximum target commodities, right? That we want to say, okay, these are the ones that are lowest hanging fruit. And we are going to work to ensure that at the beginning of the chain, we educate the farmers on what chemicals need to be utilized. We eliminate any of the chemicals that could be used as alternatives that are illegal in these markets we're trying to export to. We create an exceptionally efficient export channel, right, to ensure that we can compete with the rest of the world, right? If you look at Thailand as an example, it costs us 3 times what it costs in Thailand to export a container, right? And then you also run it, because these are fresh fruit and vegetables, any delays can cause catastrophic challenges, right? So ensuring that there's a very streamlined, fast-track process. And once again, I think to accomplish that, you have to ensure that because it's working with lots of different institutions, you need to have a single organization that is tasked with the power to influence those organizations to ensure success.
Now, I was going to ask you about that because we know that for different crops, like cocoa, cashew, they have, the associations at the local level, the leaders or the experts, engaging regularly with the farmers. So I was just thinking at that level, communication should be clear, and especially, obviously, there has to be consistencies too. But shouldn't it be more efficient even at that level in terms of passing on communication and ensuring that the farmers are educated on the chemicals used and not to use also?
100%. And I think the reality is that because oftentimes, if you look at our agricultural strategies and so on and so forth, we are trying to boil the ocean, right? I think different administrations have had, if you look at the number of crops that they've targeted, they've targeted 21 different crops as a priority. You cannot prioritize 21 things at one time. Us as individuals in our day-to-day life can't do that, right? So you've got to, if you're going to solve these complex problems, you've got to be exceptionally focused. And when you do that, then you can actually now create those marketing campaigns, those outreach opportunities to that specific subset of farmers to drive the behavior change that you are looking for.
Right. We have just 2 minutes left. Back again to the incoming administration. We have top crops like cocoa beans, sesame seeds, and cashew as Nigeria's top export commodities. But what crops would you recommend that these same crops, or perhaps in addition to them, should be focused for the incoming administration in terms of ensuring that whatever issues need to be solved in those value chains are addressed, and that we're able to export these crops?
Well, I think, those crops, the reality is, Nigeria has a huge opportunity to expand opportunities in those crops. The truth of the matter is many of those crops, I think the reality, if I was the incoming administrator, I would focus more on investing in value addition for those particular crops. So we're exporting higher value components. I think the reality is one of the reasons why we are one of the major producers of those crops is from an agroecological perspective, they can only be grown effectively in a few areas which we benefit from. I think in terms of really capitalizing on huge value improvement is where you now want to get into the more perishable crops. If you look at, for example, green beans, fresh vegetables, fresh fruits. There's huge opportunity in the export of fresh fruits and vegetables, where I think in terms of value, there's huge opportunities, particularly if we now, as a country, say, look, we are going to become the world's number one exporter of organic products and build up that credibility to be able to stand behind that. The margins that you can make in that type of a space are exceptionally high, and I think it would hugely benefit
Okay.
the Nigerian farm.